Hello everyone, my name is Jake Stark, and today we're going to be talking about our marine estuaries field trip to Lover's Key. We're going to talk about a couple different animals and plants that we saw or maybe weren't able to see just because we didn't get the opportunity to. However, we are going to see these plants and animals living in our marine estuaries locally and all around the state of Florida, and we'll hop right into it. And the first thing that we're going to discuss here is going to be the manatee. So the manatee, if you're a Floridian and you grew up in Florida, you've probably seen one of these in person. They're super common all around the coast. Really cool thing about the manatee being one of the few mammals that we see in our ecosystems is that manatees can survive in fresh, salt, or brackish water, and that's just because they are breathing the oxygen from the air. They commonly go by the nickname of a sea cow, and they're a herbivore, so they're only eating grass. Manatees are a super important part to our ecosystem because they are herbivores. A lot of times they secure our ecosystems from being choked out by different grasses or different algae. They're also known for eating a lot of invasive types of grass, which helps, kill off invasives and make sure that they're not harming any of our natural plants or natural grasses. They're originally from West India and West Africa, and they can grow all the way up to 13 foot long and weigh as much as 1,300 pounds. Manatees are super slow moving mammals, so a lot of times we see that a lot of their deaths are caused by humans or human related um, deaths, mainly from propellers on boats or ships. Um, Besides their deaths, a lot of times propellers will destroy their ecosystems, which in a lot of times is very shallow water, which is why we see them a lot in estuaries because a lot of times estuaries tend to be shallow, grassy areas. Um, so, like I said, a lot of times we see human-related deaths or issues. Besides that, manatees are threatened by crocodiles a good amount, or rapid changes in temperature. We don't really have crazy temperature changes here as much. In the Fort Myers area, we don't have a ton of crocodiles. If you go south a little bit more toward Everglades City and the 10,000 Islands, there's a good amount of crocodiles, so you'll see more deaths that way. But most of the deaths that we see here in the Lovers Key area are going to be caused by boats and people. So the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the red mangrove. This is going to be one of three different mangroves that we talk about in today's presentation and that we were able to see on our Lover's Key field trip. Red mangrove mainly gets its name from the color of the root system, as you can see here, and one of their most distinguishable features is that the root system that we see here in the picture to the right. The root systems are super intricate and they are very crisscrossy and kind of overlapping one another. What this does is this allows the red mangrove to get oxygen directly through its root system. And red mangroves are one of the bigger mangroves that we're going to talk about today. They can grow up all the way to 80 foot long, but they're most commonly found around the 20 foot mark. Um, these really intricate root systems are super important to our environment because they allow for a hideaway place for smaller bait fish and bigger predatory fish. So it really, kind of lets the ecosystem, uh, you know, be plentiful. Besides this, these mangroves sucking up a ton of water allows for a really good filtration system and produces a lot of oxygen into the water. So we'll see a lot of times there will be a large amount of fish around these mangroves. The next type of mangrove we're going to talk about is the second type, which is the black mangrove. Black mangrove is a good amount different than red mangrove and white mangrove, which is the other one that we're going to talk about here pretty soon. Black mangrove is on the smaller side. It's going to be more of like a shrub like, where it's not going to have those real intricate roots. A lot of times we see black mangroves growing on top of oyster bars, which we will also go over. It also gets its name because of its color. It usually has a really dark brown to blackish color. Um, a lot of the leaves will be similar to the red mangrove, but um, the actual bark will be a much different color. These are much smaller. Like I said, it's more of on the shrub side versus a tree. They're going to both survive in similar climates or similar ecosystems, which is why we see that they're both in our estuaries here. These estuaries and these areas that they like to grow in are like sandy or muddy shorelines where seawater reaches. So they're not going to be in super deep water. Usually it's about anywhere from 3 foot to 1 foot. And like I said, another great part of the ecosystem for smaller bait fish and larger predatory fish. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, like I mentioned, the black mangrove likes to grow in oyster bars, um, which is what we're going to talk about next. We were able to see some oyster bars on our field trip to Lover's Key, and all an oyster bar is it's just a large buildup of oysters. Usually, it's in a very shallow saltwater or brackish water. Um, this is also a really great um, habitat for smaller bait fish and larger predatory fish. Um, And when it comes to Florida, you can't really harvest any oysters off of them most of the time. Really, the biggest thing is for boaters is you kind of want to look out for them because if you do hit one of these, it could be pretty catastrophic to you yourself and your vessel. But oyster bars are a really important part of the ecosystem. They filter up to They can filter up to 2 gallons of water an hour. And like I said, they provide a really great habitat for smaller bait fish and larger predatory fish. So the next thing we're going to talk about is one of these smaller bait fish type deals that we will see a lot of times in our estuaries, and that's the fiddler crab. The fiddler crab is known for being around oyster bars, red mangrove, black mangrove, really any shrubbery, and very shallow water. They have a soft shell, unlike a lot of crabs. If you actually squeeze them and kind of pinch them, it's very, very squishy. It's not hard whatsoever. Fiddler crabs are really important to the ecosystem. A lot of different fish feed on them. When it comes to sheep's head, which is a really popular fish, you even see snapper eating them a lot. They're very, very common, like I said, in the mangroves, and a lot of bait fish feed on these. So very, very important to our ecosystem and really helps out in the food chain. The next thing we're going to talk about is sea pens, which is essentially a mangrove seed. A lot of people didn't know what these were. Um, Being from Florida, you see these all the time on your beaches. Um, just on a normal beach day, you see these kind of floating all over the shoreline. So these are mangrove seeds. A really cool thing about these seeds is that unlike other seeds, these are actually um, fertilized before they leave the plant. So the way they work is they will be fertilized on the mangrove tree itself. The mangrove tree will drop them, and then eventually these things will travel all over the place until they plant themselves. Once they're planted, they can sprout, and they can be fertilized for and be still be able to grow for up to a year. So they have a pretty good lifespan as a seed for when they can grow. So they they're pretty easy to populate. The next thing that we're going to talk about is some different bait fish that I saw while we were on the Lover's Key field trip. These are mullet. Mullet are pretty common in the Lover's Key area. We see a ton of those um, when we go out. All a mullet is you have two different types. You have striped and blacked uh, mullet. There's really the two main types that we see here. Mullet are a great bait fish. A lot of big predatory fish feed on them. And a lot of people will actually eat mullet. You don't cook it traditionally. A lot of times, the only really way to eat it is smoked. Um, it's not the greatest smelling of fish. It has a pretty nasty smell to it. Um, Mullet are super, super fast moving fish. They're pretty hard to catch, and they only feed on microplankton and different grasses. So you can't really catch them. The only way to really catch them is in a net. But like I said, mainly used for fishing for bigger predatory fish. They travel in really, really shallow water most of the time, or on flats. You'll see them on muddy flats, grassy flats, sandy flats, and they travel right below the surface in really big schools, and they're very, very quick, and they're known for jumping. They'll leap out of the water and jump kind of all over the place. Like I said, the two main ones that we see here are the striped and black mullet, but there's over 78 different species of mullet all throughout the world. So we can see these really all over the place. And the last thing that we're going to talk about today is the white mangrove. As you can see, this is also another one of the bigger mangroves that we see. Um, White mangrove, like the other mangroves, like the black and the red that we already spoke about, it gets its name from its bark color. As you can see, it's pretty white. And like I said, the white mangrove is on the taller end. It's kind of in the middle. So the tallest being the red, the smallest being the black, and then we have the white right in the middle. These usually grow from 40 to 60 foot, and they usually have a white to brownish gray colored bark. So all these mangroves are single seed mangrove. The white mangrove actually produces a fruit, which is like a reddish brown colored drupe, um, and it like just like the white and the or just like the red and the black, excuse me, it grows in our estuaries and coastal areas, anywhere in shallow water, anywhere from a foot to around 5 foot is where it'll grow and thrive mostly. But that's going to be it. This is the going to conclude our my marine and estuaries field trip PowerPoint. Thank you.